It's 3 a.m., and somewhere on the bridge of a $13 billion aircraft carrier, a junior officer is walking down a narrow passage to a tiny locked door. He knocks. Inside that room, a man responsible for the lives of more than 5,000 people and a warship worth billions of dollars is asleep on a bed barely bigger than a twin mattress. The officer knocks again. The captain wakes instantly, opens the door, listens to a 10-second report, gives an order, and is back asleep before the door even fully closes. He'll do this 3 or 4 more times before sunrise. That tiny room is called the sea cabin, and it might be the loneliest room on the entire ship. No family photos on every wall. No long conversations with friends. Just a bed, a small desk, and a direct line to the bridge, because the man sleeping in it is never actually off duty. Not for one single second of a 9-month deployment. Right now, in the entire United States Navy, only 11 people hold this job. Out of everyone who has ever worn a naval aviator's wings in over 100 years of carrier history, fewer than 250 have ever sat in that chair. That's fewer people than have ever been to space. Fewer than have won a Super Bowl as a starting quarterback. And every single one of them got there the same brutal way. Through decades, most of us can barely imagine, carrying a weight most of us will never have to understand. So what actually happens behind that locked door, and what does it take to become one of the loneliest, most powerful people at sea? Stick around, because by the end of this, you'll understand why command of a carrier is considered one of the hardest jobs in the entire US military. And here's a question for you. If you had to be personally responsible for 5,000 lives every single day for 2 years straight, with 0 days off, do you think you could actually do it? Let us know in the comments, because most people who try don't make it. Before we go inside that sea cabin, you need to understand just how rare the person sleeping in it really is. To even be eligible to command an aircraft carrier, federal law requires that officer to be a naval aviator or naval flight officer, not an admiral's favorite, not a political pick, a pilot or flight officer who has spent decades earning it, one qualifying tour at a time. The journey from the day they get commissioned to the day they finally take command of a carrier typically spans 25 years or more, and nearly every single step along the way is designed to eliminate most of the people trying. First, they have to fly. Years of flying combat aircraft off carrier decks, building the exact kind of split-second judgment that keeps pilots alive when a single mistake on approach can end in a fireball on the deck. Every landing is a test. Every deployment adds another layer of experience that either gets them noticed for advancement or quietly ends their shot at ever going further. Then they have to lead, commanding an entire squadron of their own, proving they can run people, not just aircraft, managing dozens of pilots and hundreds of maintenance crew, all while still being evaluated for the next step up. Somewhere in the middle of all this, nuclear-powered carrier candidates get sent through nuclear power school. Months of dense academic training most people would find brutal, even without a flight career on top of it. Officers who've been through it describe it as some of the hardest classroom work in the entire military. Dense reactor physics and engineering crammed into a compressed timeline, taught to men and women who are also still expected to perform flawlessly in every other part of their career. After that comes a tour as executive officer, or XO, aboard a carrier, essentially serving as the ship's second in command, and learning every single detail of what it takes to run this floating city, from galley operations to flight deck safety to disciplinary hearings, before they're even allowed to be considered for the top job. Then, in one of the strangest requirements in the entire process, they have to go command a completely different kind of ship first, something called a deep draft vessel, often a support or supply ship, just to prove they can independently command at sea before anyone lets them near the wheel of a carrier. Only after all of that does an officer's name even get submitted to a selection board, and that board is brutal. The exact selection rate isn't published, but insiders describe the math simply. Thousands of naval aviators start this journey, and only a handful, in any given year, across the entire Navy, ever get chosen. Officers who are passed over for command, or who decline an opportunity when it's offered, are typically disqualified permanently from ever being considered again. There is no second chance, no reapplying next year. You either get the call, or that door closes forever. Once selected, a carrier command tour typically runs somewhere between 24 and 48 months, significantly longer than commanding officer tours on almost any other ship in the fleet. And once they finally sit in that chair, there's no room left for mistakes. Because unlike almost any other job on Earth, the captain of an aircraft carrier cannot delegate the responsibility that comes with it. Here's what makes this job different from basically every other leadership position that exists, in the military or anywhere else. If the ship runs aground, if it collides with another vessel, if a sailor dies in an accident anywhere on board, the captain answers for it personally, not the sailor standing watch at the time, not the department head in charge of that section. The captain, regardless of who actually made the mistake, regardless of where he was standing when it happened, that responsibility lands entirely on him. Think about what that actually means in practice. Every single day at sea, this one person is legally and professionally on the hook for the actions of thousands of sailors he cannot possibly watch every minute of every day. A mistake on the flight deck at 2 a.m., a fire in a compartment 6 decks down, a supply ship coming alongside too fast during replenishment. All of it eventually traces back to one name and one signature. That kind of pressure would break most people within a matter of weeks. Carrier captains carry it for years. This standard shapes every single decision, even ones that seem small from the outside. Approving the ship's daily schedule of flight operations. Reviewing training evaluations for a division he's never personally met. Signing off on supply logistics during a 9-month deployment, where running short on a single critical part could ground half the air wing. There's no delegating the final call, even when there are department heads, division officers, and an entire chain of command standing between him and the actual problem. Ultimately, if something goes wrong, it was his ship, his crew, and his responsibility, full stop. Compare that to almost any other high-pressure job in civilian life. A CEO can blame a division manager. A surgeon operates with a team who shares the outcome. Even an airline pilot, whose mistakes can be fatal, is typically judged individually for a single flight, not for the cumulative safety record of 5,000 people over years at a time. The carrier captain's accountability has no real civilian equivalent, which is part of why so few people are trusted with it, and why the selection process is designed to eliminate anyone who isn't built to carry it without breaking. And it doesn't stop when the sun goes down. Because of the non-stop nature of flight operations, carrier captains become experts at something almost nobody else has to master: catching sleep in fragments. From roughly 8 a.m. until flight operations wrap up late at night, the captain is almost always needed somewhere: on the bridge, in the command center, walking the ship, meeting with department heads. What sleep he does get often comes in short bursts inside that tiny sea cabin, interrupted by knocks on the door and reports that can't wait until morning. Some retired carrier captains have described nights where they were woken multiple times before dawn, gave an order half asleep, and were back under before the door finished closing, all without ever fully remembering the conversation the next morning. That sea cabin isn't much to look at. It sits tucked behind the bridge, small enough that some describe it as barely bigger than a walk-in closet, just a bunk, a small desk, and historically, a direct voice tube connecting straight to the officers standing watch above. It exists purely so the captain can be reached instantly, at any hour, without delay, because on a ship where seconds matter, there's no time to send someone looking for him. What most people don't realize is that a carrier captain doesn't just have one room. He actually has 2 completely separate living spaces, and the difference between them says everything about what this job really is. The sea cabin, the one near the bridge, is where he lives while the ship is underway and flight operations are running. It's small, functional, and built entirely around speed and access, not comfort. Some estimates put the footprint of a modern carrier captain's quarters somewhere around 200 to 350 square feet total, across both spaces combined, which sounds spacious until you remember that most of it is taken up by a desk, a private bathroom, and storage for uniforms, leaving barely enough open floor to change clothes standing up. But when the ship is in port, the captain moves to a second space entirely, known as the in-port cabin. This one is noticeably bigger, sometimes described as being closer to a small apartment, with room enough to host visiting officials, hold private meetings, and occasionally even entertain dignitaries. Presidents and foreign leaders have been received in carrier captains' cabins before, which tells you something about the strange dual life this job requires. One week, the captain is sleeping in a closet-sized room, getting woken up every 90 minutes. The next, He's hosting a formal reception in a cabin, nicer than most Manhattan apartments. But here's the twist almost nobody expects. Even in that nicer, in-port cabin, the captain is still never truly off the clock. Naval tradition holds that the commanding officer of a warship is never fully relieved of responsibility while assigned to that ship, whether he's asleep, eating dinner, or hosting guests. Every space he occupies doubles as a workspace. Every conversation can turn into a decision that affects thousands of people. Unlike almost anyone else on board, who can close a door and mentally clock out for the night, the captain's bedroom and his office are, in a very real sense, the exact same room, no matter which one he happens to be sleeping in that week. And there's something else that makes this even stranger. Despite commanding the entire ship, the captain is often not even the highest-ranking person aboard. When the carrier is part of a strike group, a rear admiral typically comes aboard as the overall strike group commander, complete with his own separate quarters, often larger and more comfortable than the captain's own. The captain runs the ship. The admiral runs the mission. It's a strange kind of power that comes with an asterisk attached to it, total responsibility for the vessel, but someone senior always just a few doors down the passageway. To really understand what this job does to a person, it helps to walk through a single ordinary day. The captain's day often starts before sunrise, checking overnight reports from the officers who stood watch through the night, absorbing anything that happened while he grabbed a few hours of broken sleep. By around 8 a.m., as flight operations ramp up, he's typically on the bridge or in the command center, present for launches and recoveries that can happen dozens of times throughout the day. Early morning refueling operations alongside a supply ship, navigating narrow straits, or entering and leaving port are all moments that specifically require his presence, because these are the exact situations where one wrong call could end a career, or far worse. Throughout the day, he's pulled between roles that would exhaust most people individually, let alone combined. He's reviewing training reports and safety evaluations. He's meeting with department heads about supply shortages or maintenance issues. He's walking sections of the ship, checking morale, occasionally stopping to talk with sailors who may have never spoken to him directly before. He's fielding updates from the strike group commander about the broader mission, translating those priorities into orders his own crew can execute. And through all of it, flight operations continue overhead, meaning he's never more than a few minutes away from being needed on the bridge again. Flight operations often don't wrap up until late into the night, sometimes past 10 p.m., and only then does the captain finally get a chance to head toward that small sea cabin. But even then, sleep is never guaranteed to last. A change in weather, a mechanical issue, a security concern, any of it can mean another knock on that door before dawn. Retired officers who served as junior watchstanders describe the strange mix of guilt and urgency that comes with waking a commanding officer at 3 a.m., knowing he's running on fumes, but also knowing the ship needs his decision immediately, not in the morning. Some describe leaving the bridge just long enough to knock, deliver the report in under a minute, receive an order, and race back before anything on deck has time to go wrong. Multiply that single day by hundreds, sometimes over 1,000 days across a full command tour, and you start to understand why so few people ever make it to this job, and why even fewer stay the same person by the time they leave it. There's a phrase that's followed military commanders for centuries: the loneliness of command. And nowhere is it more literal than on an aircraft carrier. The captain cannot be friends with his crew, not in any ordinary sense. He can't sit at the junior sailor's mess and joke around the way he might have as a young pilot decades earlier. He can't vent about a bad day to the people who work for him, because everything he says gets carried through the ship within minutes. Even his closest working relationships, with his executive officer, with senior department heads, exist inside a strict professional boundary that can never fully relax, because at any moment, he might have to make a decision that puts one of those same people in danger, or hold them accountable for a mistake that could end their career. It's a strange kind of trade-off that most people never think about when they imagine command. The higher someone climbs, the fewer people they can honestly talk to. A young ensign can complain about a rough week to a roommate 2 bunks over. A department head can vent to a peer over coffee. But the captain, by definition, has no peer on that ship. The executive officer reports to him. The department heads report to him. Even the strike group commander, while technically senior, is focused on the mission, not on being a sounding board for a captain's personal doubts. Some retired commanding officers have described genuinely looking forward to port visits. Not for the break in routine, but simply for a rare chance to have an unguarded conversation with someone outside the chain of command, even if just for an hour. Sailors who've served under carrier captains often describe them the same way: respected, sometimes deeply admired, but almost never truly known. Most sailors will go their entire deployment without a real conversation with the captain, beyond a passing greeting in a passageway or a formal speech over the ship's intercom. He becomes less of a person to them and more of a presence, a voice on the announcing system, a figure on the bridge wing during flight operations, someone whose mood that morning can somehow be felt through the whole ship before anyone even explains why. And this isolation doesn't stay on the ship. It follows carrier captains home too. Command tours run up to 4 years, much of it spent deployed, which means missed birthdays, missed anniversaries, missed years of a child's life that no promotion or command plaque can ever give back. Spouses of commanding officers often describe learning to run entire households alone for months at a time, raising kids essentially as single parents while their partner is thousands of miles away, unreachable except for a rare, rationed phone call. Some describe the strange adjustment period every time their spouse comes home, relearning how to share decisions after months of making every single one alone, or watching their kids need time to warm back up to a parent who missed half a school year of soccer games and parent-teacher conferences. By the time a captain finally earns that chair after 25 years of climbing toward it, he's often already sacrificed more of his personal life than most people sacrifice in an entire career. And the sacrifice doesn't end once he gets there. If anything, command is when it becomes heaviest, because now the absence isn't just physical distance, it's total mental consumption. Even the rare moments home, a captain's mind is often still partially on the ship, still running through contingencies, still carrying the weight of a job that never fully lets go, even thousands of miles from the nearest ocean. So what actually separates a carrier captain from every other leader in uniform? It isn't just the flying experience, or the nuclear training, or the decades of qualifying tours, although all of that matters enormously. It's the willingness to carry total, undivided responsibility for thousands of lives, without ever being able to hand that weight off to someone else, even for a single night's sleep. It's choosing a career path so competitive that fewer people complete it than have traveled to space, knowing full well that most of the sailors who serve under them will only ever remember them as a voice, a rank, a presence, passing through the passageway. It's sacrificing ordinary family life for years at a time, trading birthdays and anniversaries for a shot at a job most people will never even know exists. It's also carrying an entirely different relationship with fear than most people ever develop. Most of us get to feel afraid, and then go home and let that fear fade. A carrier captain has to feel the weight of every possible worst-case scenario: a fire, a collision, an attack, a man overboard in rough seas at night, and still walk onto that bridge every single morning, looking calm enough that 5,000 people can trust the ship is in steady hands. That performance, done convincingly enough to actually hold a crew together during a real crisis, might be the single hardest part of the entire job. Harder even than the flying, harder than the nuclear engineering, harder than the decades of qualifying tours it took just to get the chance to try. And still, every single one of them signs up for it again. Not for the paycheck, not for the title, but because somewhere in that 25-year climb, they decided that keeping 5,000 people safe, feeding them, training them, bringing them home again, was worth more than any comfort a normal life could offer. That's not just a rank pinned to a collar. That's a decision made and remade, every single day, alone in a tiny sea cabin. 3 decks from thousands of sailors who are counting on him without even realizing how much he's carrying for them. Because at the end of every command tour, what these captains remember isn't the size of the ship, or the title on the door, or even the moment they finally made it into that chair after 25 years of trying. It's the sailors who made it home safely, standing on the pier, looking for their families, never fully knowing just how many sleepless nights it took to get them there. So really think about that question again. Total responsibility for thousands of people, every single day, for years, with almost no one to share the weight. Could you do it? Tell us in the comments what part of this life would be hardest for you. And if this pulled you into a world you never knew existed, subscribe, because there's a lot more command deck waiting to be explored.